Authorities say they've confiscated $6 trillion in counterfeit U.S. bonds. 8 people were arrested across Italy in connection with an ongoing operation that netted $20 billion in fake bonds in 2010. The bonds, which carried the false issue date of 1934, had been transported from Hong Kong to Zurich in 2007, where they were transferred to a Swiss trust. Prosecutors say it appears the suspects intended to sell the notes to a developing nation directly or through an intermediary bank. But U.S. officials confirmed the bonds were counterfeit. Mark Hamrick.
Hello YouTubers, this is David Childley and this is your latest 2012 update. Now there's been a lot happening in the last 3 or 4 days in the news, particularly in the financial headlines. Now I wanted to make you aware of good old Lord James of Blakeheath. Now I'm going to be mentioning 3 particular guys today, and they've all got big balls because they're standing up and they're telling the world about this huge financial fraud that's been going on for a long time. Most of the senior bankers and politicians have been involved in it at the very highest level. And a few days ago in the House of Lords in London, in our Houses of Parliament, Lord James came out and revealed that £15 trillion had come in to the UK economy. Now, HSBC and the Royal Bank of Scotland gave and issued receipts in 2009 for this 15 trillion, which is equal to 759,000 tonnes of gold. Now, officially, it's only a couple of thousand tonnes maximum ever been mined. So this really throws a new angle on it, because if officially there's only a couple of thousand tonnes of gold ever mined, then how come there behind the scenes there is such a vast quantity used to guarantee loans? Now 15 trillion came into the UK economy a few years ago. It begs the question, where did the money go? And good old Lord James is trying to find out the answers and is demanding an investigation. Now, this all follows a number of sightings and spottings of Federal Reserve bonds, or what they call fake US Reserve bonds. These have been seized at borders all around the world in the last few years, and the official line from the mainstream media is that they are fake bonds. Well, in fact, they could well be real bonds. You see, there is an investigation underway, and in that investigation, there is proof that the US Treasury, via the Federal Reserve, when they issued bonds many years ago as security, every so often there would be a little error or a mistake. And it was really done as a long-term strategy, so that maybe in 100 years, when them bonds were tried to be cashed, there would be a mistake that would then be identified in the mainstream press as counterfeit. Now, the fact that all of these bonds being seized are being released into the mainstream press is quite interesting in itself. It's not something that's being blacked out. So they want us to know that these bonds are being seized, but when the mainstream press cover them and claim them as fake, there is no way the Fed Reserve are ever going to honour those. And that's what's happening. That before the Second World War, in the early 30s, lots of gold needed to be protected, and the Fed Reserve offered a solution, and many countries in the Philippines, in Japan, in China, they gave across their gold for safekeeping during the war, so to say, and in return the Fed Reserve issued a number of receipts. And many years later, these receipts are popping up all over the world at this point in time, and the Fed Reserve, with the backing of their controlled mainstream media, are saying these are fake and we're not going to honour them. So it's quite interesting, because there's a lot of wealthy dynasties out there in Asia that want their value back, or their gold back, and the Fed Reserve Board, or ultimately the bankers, are really not playing ball. Now, Benjamin Fulford sort of been breaking this story for a long time. A lot of people have been saying that they don't believe or trust his version, but I've always followed Ben. I've always had this feeling that he is one of the few out there that is giving real good information.
Hello everyone, welcome to Global Government News. Today is Monday, February 20th, 2012, and I'm Darko. My website is ggnonline.com, and on YouTube it's ddarko2012 and ddarko2013. Please subscribe to the ddarko2013 account because 2012 may not be active for too much longer, or if it is, I may not be posting videos there for too much longer. All right, you can follow me by email by putting in your email address there. I have a poll up there. It's pretty old, and just a quick side note, there was a viewer that was mentioning something to me about one of these pictures I had up here of Morgellons fibers basically being a cocoon's nest, and I just want to put this out there publicly because he's mentioned it to me twice in a private message and said he wanted to keep me honest. Well, just to put it out there, I wasn't trying to be dishonest. I just haven't had the time to go in there and actually I wanted to do some more research on this whole cocoon thing and the Morgellons fibers. I have seen them. They are Morgellons fibers that kind of go like little tumbleweed type thing, but it just settles on the ground and there's not much of it, and I know it's not a cocoon. That particular picture was marked as Morgellons fibers, so again, I wasn't trying to be dishonest with that photo. I removed it for you, and yeah, see there, it was right around here. So I removed it, and if I can get a picture as soon as it starts getting warmer out and it starts settling on the ground, I will. All right, and then also I can find time to come up with a real good poll. So moving on here, why were the trillions in fake bonds held in Chicago Fed crates? This is from Zero Hedge from 2/17/2012, and it goes on and it says, while the authors reserve the judgment on the authenticity of the bonds, what they do wonder is whether the boxes were also fake. They go on and say, because while we can understand why someone would counterfeit Treasury paper itself, what we don't get is why someone would go to the extra effort to create a, quote, fake compartment in which to store it. It says here, in this case, a compartment that is property of the Chicago Federal Reserve System. It says here, and it goes on, it says, Chicago Fed President Charles Evans will be kind enough to explain why the Versailles Treaty Chicago Fed crates are floating around in Europe and filled with $6 trillion in supposedly fake bearer bonds. What is also interesting is that the simple Google search for Mother Box Treaty of Versailles yields the following: transferring rights over Mother Box Treaty of Versailles 1934 Illinois Bank. We transfer rights over to Mother Box Treaty of Versailles 1934 Illinois Bank having the next status has been verified by authorities being legal, certain, and real existence. And you go in there and it basically keeps going with SKR, the reputable security house in a European country. And if you go through here, you can see the different pictures of the boxes, and this is what from Divine Cosmos, David Wilcock's channel. I'm not exactly 100% positive on Fulford or Wilcock, but you got to take this information as it comes. I know there'll be certain individuals on YouTube that will come through and give their explanations of a equal money system and a promissory note system, and I don't really care about that. I'm just trying to put this information out there to make people think, to help people think. So this right here, it goes on, it says it's an uncorroborated account on the province of the boxes. And it says here that unfortunately the counterfeiters may have stumbled upon something they had no idea about. You kind of scroll down here. Bonds were issued in exchange for the gold. Each country that handed over its gold and or had its gold forcibly taken was given certificates of deposit or bonds in exchange for what they gave up. The bonds were issued by the Fed through their various banks in major cities of the United States. These bonds were considered to be valuable and as redeemable as cash. The problem was that the Fed printed vastly more money in these bonds than existed in the open, honest economy. Trillions upon trillions of dollars worth beginning in the 1920s. And finishing up, and I'll move on. Remember, the amount of gold that actually existed was much greater than anyone could have ever imagined, since the Asians had kept it all very secret. Had the public found out much gold there really existed, or how much gold actually existed, it would have created a massive economic shock. Gold would have become practically worthless overnight. This is news coming out of the Philippines. $2 trillion in fake U.S. bonds seized. This is from February 20th, and it says here, officials said they have seized more than $2 trillion in counterfeit U.S. Federal Reserve bonds and arrested one suspect in the southern Philippines. The fakes were of, quote, very good quality because they were probably the real thing. And it says, but some of the bond denominations did not exist, i.e. the, quote, heir. This is a story, an older one, that I tried to track down from, I believe it was Reuters, but I just couldn't find it in the scouring that I did. 2 Japanese carrying $134 billion worth of U.S. bonds detained in Italy. Okay, I'm sorry, it was the AP. Not much of a difference. I think they're both owned by the same family. It says here, Italian authorities have confiscated $20 billion in counterfeit U.S. government bonds. It says authorities say the bonds were equality that theoretically could have defrauded financial institutions, and they stopped some people in a highway arrest area when military police were taking a break. And goes on and says that the officers did a routine search of the vehicles after, quote, suspicious behavior of the men, and found, quote, to their surprise, end quote, a briefcase with 40 bonds each. So it just happened to be. So just like the Filipino, the 6 men are under investigation for receiving stolen goods. This is just from February 20th, 2012. Counterfeit U.S. bonds found in Zurich, Switzerland pose, quote, concrete and serious danger, end quote, to global financial security. Well, I bet it would. It says here, counterfeit U.S. Fed bonds dated to 1934, valued in the trillions, were found in Zurich. According to the BBC, 8 people have been arrested. Then moving on to other news, with Greece, evacuation warning to Britons in Greece as country prepares to sign off yet another rescue package. Says here, 3,000 protesters clash with riot police in Athens over cuts as Greek Prime Minister Lucas Papademos flies to Brussels. To seal a bailout deal. So go to the little headquarters of the Council of 300. Report insider documents detail a March 23rd Greek default plan. Government to freeze bank accounts, eliminate euro, restrict capital flow. That's March 23rd. So a lot of stuff's gonna be happening in March. YouTube's switching over their little interface. FBI may shut down your internet access March 8th. FBI is planning to unplug DNS servers to help eliminate malware from over half Fortune 500 companies and government agencies still infected. In early 2012, change could potentially leave a great number of internet users without access on the web. So, it's not like a big conspiracy or anything, but it's just something to pay attention to. I've been paying attention to the whole thing in Iran, and they're actually, you got Russians having ships docked in Syria, then you got Iran sailing for the first time up to Syria's little docks and ports. You have U.S. troops in Israel. There's a lot of stuff going on right now, and it looks like there may actually be some kind of confrontation finally here in 2012. So 4 years after rotten mortgages helped trigger a global financial crisis, a Citigroup quality control team was still finding flaws in new loans that included altered tax forms, straw buyers, and borrowers who listed fictitious employers. It says here, Citigroup whistleblower says banks brute force hid bad loans from the United States. Then we have 10 high-profile resignations at banks across the world in the past 2 weeks. This is from Blacklisted News. World Bank CEO Zoellick resigns. Then we have CFO Australia resigns. Ons Bank says here, Credit Suisse chief. Then we have Kuwait Central Bank CEO resigns. Slovenia, 2 largest bank CEOs resign, and Bank of India CEO resign. Says these individuals, this is just an opinion or comment, have held those positions for a long time and then just get up and walk away for no reason. It doesn't make much sense. For boomers, it's a new era of work till you drop. So this is from the AP. This is the mainstream media telling most people that are unaware, or they're just whatever, they bury their heads in the sand because they're just too busy trying to survive and get by. It says here that most people are going to end up working until what? Until they literally drop, until they die. And they're going to do it with what? With less money being they're going to be getting compensated less money, and they're not going to have anything really left over as far as 401ks and pensions and all that. It goes on there and talks about how globalization brought over people who are willing to work for less. But this is a planned society, so it's kind of to be expected, right? It's just finally they're coming out and telling the hoopleheads. It says here, oil jumps to 9-month high after Iran cut supply. Oil jumps to 9-month high above $105 in Europe as Iran cut supply to Britain and France. Iran stops oil exports to British companies as Haig warns Israeli attack would not be wise. Then we have this private prison company to demand 90% occupancy. The nation's largest private prison company is offering cash-strapped state governments to buy up their penitentiaries and manage their criminals. But it says here there's a catch that states must guarantee that there are enough prisoners to ensure that the venture is profitable to the company. Remember that program with the family court system? The judges were actually getting paid for every every child that they screwed over, every family that they screwed over, they got paid. It says here more than $350 million in guard contracts awarded on Valentine's Day. Then Obama pushes global minimum tax in Milwaukee. Remember we saw that, the global minimum tax recently. Now Obama's pushing for it. U.S. Georgian nation to mull free trade or slave trade. China's reaping the rewards of Central Asian investment in oil and Turkmenistan. And U.S. Taliban talks reveal America's failure in Afghanistan. But what? Oh, what? It's not a failure. 61% increase in heroin.